The first time Ranger Elias Mercer heard his own voice calling from the tree line, he was standing beside a dead man. The body had been found at dawn just off an unofficial spur trail above Tenaya Creek, wedged between two granite boulders polished smooth by years of snowmelt. The hiker's face was turned toward the sky, mouth open, eyes filmed white with the cold, and one hand was lifted stiffly toward the woods, as if he had spent his last seconds pointing at something nobody else could see. There were no obvious animal marks, no blood, no torn gear, just a broken ankle, a backpack that had been carefully unzipped and emptied beside him, and a circle of wet pine needles pressed flat around the corpse, as though something heavy had paced there all night. Then the radio on Elias's vest crackled, not with dispatch, not with static. With him. "Copy that," said Elias Mercer's voice, low and calm, through the speaker at his chest. "I found another one." Ranger Marisol Vega, standing 3 feet away, looked up so fast the brim of her hat snapped against a pine branch. Elias did not answer because he could not. His throat had closed. Every hair on his arms rose under the fabric of his uniform. The radio hissed again, and his own voice returned, this time farther away somehow, as if it were speaking from inside a canyon. "Do not let it hear you breathe." The forest went silent, not quiet, silent. No wind in the lodgepoles, no creek, no raven calls. Even the insects seemed to pull themselves out of the air. The kind of silence that did not belong outdoors. The kind that made the world feel staged, waiting for one wrong movement to begin. Elias did what every rational part of him told him not to do. He turned toward the trees. Between the trunks, maybe 50 yards downhill, somebody in a National Park Service uniform was walking away from them. Same tan shirt, same green trousers, same broad shoulders, same stride. Welcome back to the channel. Tonight's story comes out of Yosemite National Park in the summer of 2021, when smoke sat low over the valley and too many people vanished where the trail maps looked the simplest. Tell me where you are watching from. If true horror, wilderness dread, and stories that stay with you after midnight are your kind of nightmare, like, subscribe, and leave a comment before we go deeper. Because what Elias found in Yosemite was not just a missing hiker. It was something that had already learned how to sound human. In 2021, Yosemite was crowded in all the wrong ways. The brochures still sold the park as cathedral-like waterfalls, granite domes, and quiet transcendence, but that year the beauty felt strained, overhandled, watched too hard by too many people who mistook wilderness for a scenic backdrop and danger for atmosphere. Reservation systems had changed the flow of visitors, pandemic fatigue had packed the trailheads whenever restrictions loosened, and long stretches of summer hung under a haze of wildfire smoke that turned the sunlight orange and made even noon look a little diseased. People came desperate to feel free again. They ignored closure signs. They wandered off trail for better photos. They believed a signal bar or downloaded map meant they were safe. Elias Mercer knew better, which was one reason he had lasted as a backcountry and search and rescue ranger longer than most. He was 36, broad-framed without being bulky, and carried himself with a quiet steadiness that calmed panicking families before he ever spoke. He had been with the Park Service for nearly 11 years, the last 6 in Yosemite. He had seen heat stroke falls, hypothermia, bad decisions, sudden weather bear panics, and the peculiar arrogance city people brought into old landscapes. He knew how fast confidence turned to pleading once darkness reached the trees. He knew that the park did not kill out of malice. It killed because granite did not care, rivers did not negotiate, and distance became enormous the moment someone left the line where other boots had gone before. He lived in government housing near the edge of Yosemite Valley, in a cabin that had once been charming and was now mostly functional. The floorboards popped at night. The plumbing clanked in the cold. The back porch looked toward a stand of incense cedar that turned black after sunset, the trunks packed so tightly together they looked less like a grove than a wall. He kept the place clean, sparse, and temporary by instinct. A bed, a kitchen table, 2 chairs, 1 shelf of field guides and incident reports, 1 coffee mug with a chipped rim boots drying by the door. He had no wife, no children, and no local life that extended much beyond other rangers' seasonal staff and dispatch. That was not a tragedy. It was simply how the years had arranged themselves. Yosemite had a way of taking up all available emotional space. The job rewarded vigilance and punished distraction. Elias had become good at living inside that equation. His routine was a strict one, especially during peak season. Up before dawn. Coffee black and too hot. Weather check. Fire conditions. Incident logs from the previous shift. Then trail patrols, permit issues, welfare checks, search calls, lost tourists, turned around climbers, the endless human inventory of people underestimating the Sierra Nevada. On quieter mornings, he preferred the high country, to Alumni Meadows, Sunrise Lakes, the Cathedral Range when visibility allowed. He trusted altitude more than crowds. The air felt more honest there. Still, even before the disappearances began, there had been details that bothered him, not dramatic details. The job trained you to distrust dramatic details because tourists supplied those constantly. No. What unsettled Elias were the small irregularities that did not fit ordinary wilderness logic. A boot print found beside a restricted drainage that ended halfway through a patch of mud as though the hiker had stepped upward instead of onward. A tent discovered abandoned at a legal site near White Wolf sleeping bags still warm. According to the ranger who checked it, shoes neatly placed outside, owner gone without water pack or phone. A little girl in Curry Village telling her exhausted mother that a man had stood beyond the restroom lights and called her name in her father's voice, even though her father had been inside with them the entire time. A radio report from a volunteer searcher who swore he heard dispatch, directing him off route only to learn later that dispatch had not spoken to him for 30 minutes. Each incident on its own could be explained away. Human error, stress, echoes, pranks, misremembered timing. The wilderness made fools of perception. Elias knew that. Any good ranger knew that. But Yosemite in 2021 felt subtly out of register, as if some deeper rhythm beneath the park had shifted half a beat, and everything above it was starting to stumble. The first missing hiker case that truly held him came in late June. A 24-year-old graduate student from Sacramento named Nolan Price had gone missing during a solo trip near the Sunrise Creek area. He was fit, well-equipped, cautious by all accounts, and had texted his sister a picture of Half Dome in the late afternoon before disappearing overnight. Search teams found his camp. They found his stove, his food canister, and his boots lined up just outside the tent flap. They found his socks inside the tent, damp with use. They found his flashlight hanging from the ridgeline. What they did not find were signs of struggle, direction of travel, blood prints, or any reason a man would walk barefoot into granite country after dark. Elias had gone over the site twice, once as a ranger, once alone. The second time, he noticed a detail omitted from the initial report. Nolan's journal, half tucked beneath his sleeping pad, had been soaked at the edges but dry inside, as if something with wet hands had opened it and then carefully closed it again. Most entries were ordinary trail notes, mileage, weather sketches of peaks. But on the last written page, the handwriting changed. The lines slanted hard to the right. The ink was dented into the paper. He keeps calling from outside the tent. He sounds exactly like me. Elias had turned the journal over to investigations. They filed it under evidence of psychological distress. That should have been the end of it. Missing persons in national parks attracted rumor the way carrion drew flies. There were always online theories, campfire versions, embellished retellings. The practical world of reports and recovery usually sanded those stories back down to sad, explainable facts. But then came a second hiker in July. Then a third report in August. This one resolved when the woman was found wandering dehydrated near Glen Ullin, barefoot and sunburned, with no memory of the previous 12 hours except that she had followed her fiancé's voice into the trees. The fiancé had never left the trail. Elias did not tell anyone how much that rattled him. Instead, he started keeping a private notebook separate from official documentation. He wrote dates, weather names, coordinates, odd witness statements, phrases repeated across unrelated reports. He wrote down everything that official procedure forced into cleaner language. He wrote what the frightened people actually said. Something was outside my tent, but it knew my husband's laugh. I heard my mother singing. My mother has been dead 9 years. The voice kept moving like it was circling me. It got angry when I stopped answering. By late August, he had nearly filled the notebook. He also stopped sleeping well. The first problem was the dreams. In them, he was always on patrol, always alone, always hearing a person in distress somewhere just beyond visibility. A child crying behind trees. A man shouting from fog. a woman whispering his name from beneath running water. He would follow because of course he would. That was the job. But the terrain never behaved. Distances lengthened. Trails folded back into themselves. Granite domes leaned at impossible angles. And always, just before he reached the source of the voice, he would hear himself answer from somewhere else in the dark. The second problem was waking. Twice in 1 week he came up out of sleep convinced someone had spoken directly into his ear. Once a clear female voice said, "He found you first." Another time, unmistakably, his own voice said, "Do not open the door." When he snapped on the cabin light, nothing was there except the square shape of the room and his pulse beating in the silence. He blamed stress. Then one evening in early September, after a long shift that ended with a heat-exhausted tourist evacuation near Vernal Fall, Elias stopped at the small employee bulletin board by the operations office. Most of the pinned notices were the usual clutter: housing swaps, gear requests, seasonal goodbyes, a flyer about smoke exposure. Half hidden beneath them was a photocopied missing person notice, unofficial and crookedly stapled. No park header, no case number. Just a grainy picture of a man in his 30s wearing a blue shell jacket and smiling beside a trail sign. Missing Ben Hollis. Last known area near Tenaya Lake, September 14, 2021. If found, do not approach alone. That last line had been handwritten in black marker, then aggressively crossed out. Elias stared at it longer than he should have. Marisol Vega found him there. She was one of the few rangers he trusted without qualification, sharp-minded, unsentimental, and impossible to rattle in front of other people. She followed his gaze, tore the notice down, and folded it once. "That was not cleared for public posting," she said. "Why was it crossed out?" Marisol did not answer right away. A bad sign. Finally, she said, because law enforcement thought it would cause panic. And would it? She met his eyes. It might. That was the first moment Elias understood that whatever was happening in Yosemite was bigger than scattered weird reports and stressed-out hikers. Something had shifted inside official channels. People above his pay grade were choosing language carefully, which meant there was already enough to be afraid of. By the end of that week, Ben Hollis was assigned to Elias's district, and the park stopped feeling merely strange. It started feeling patient. Benjamin Hollis was 32 years old, from Fresno, moderately experienced, and exactly the kind of hiker Yosemite usually recovered alive. He had entered the park on a solo permit for a 2-night backcountry loop starting near Tenaya Lake. He checked in properly, carried appropriate gear, and texted 2 friends at regular intervals until the early evening of September 14th when the messages stopped. His vehicle remained at the trailhead. Search teams went out the next morning. They found one camp area consistent with his permit route, a second fire ring that was not his, and a section of disturbed soil beneath lodgepole pines where somebody had written a word with a hiking pole tip and then tried to erase it. Elias saw the photos before he saw the site. The ranger tech scrolling through them hesitated on image 7. The marks were faint, half-scuffed, nearly lost beneath pine duff, but the letters were still legible if you knew to look. "Listen," that could mean anything, the tech said too quickly. Elias nodded, but he did not believe it meant nothing. By the 3rd day of searching, official optimism had thinned. They found one trekking pole snagged in brush above a drainage. They found a torn map corner. They found a protein bar wrapper folded into a square and placed carefully on a boulder. None of it made sense as a route. It looked less like a man navigating the backcountry and more like a man leaving proof that he had still been rational at selected intervals, as if he were trying to create islands of deliberate thought inside something increasingly wrong. The breakthrough came on the morning of September 17th, when a volunteer team reported a possible visual below an unmaintained spur above Tenaya Creek. Elias and Marisol hiked in with one medic and a law enforcement ranger. Smoke lay low through the trees. The air smelled of warm dust pine sap, and that distant charred sweetness wildfire season carried everywhere. Underfoot, the trail dissolved into game tracks and exposed root systems. The creek noise below should have been steady, but in certain pockets it vanished, muffled by terrain in a way Elias found irrationally unsettling. Nobody spoke much on the approach. Search professionals learned not to fill dangerous ground with conversation. Words distracted. Also, too much talking gave fear a surface to climb onto. Elias focused instead on details. broken twig at hip height, partial slide mark near a granite shelf, one black feather caught in manzanita. Human passage, yes, but not the clean panic line of someone injured and desperate to reach water. About a quarter mile off the legal route, they found Hollis. He was dead, though not fresh enough that the word landed with the sharp force it should have. His body lay in a small bowl of granite and pine duff, where runoff probably collected in wetter months. One leg had twisted under him badly. The ankle was mangled enough to suggest a fall, but not a fatal one. No predator damage, no defensive wounds. His face was gray-white and oddly serene, except for the mouth, which had been stretched open wide enough to split one corner. Not in a scream, in surprise maybe, or in the shape someone makes trying to repeat a sound they do not understand. His pack sat beside him, not thrown, not scattered, arranged. Sleeping bag, water filter, stove, med kit, food, headlamp, phone. Everything laid out in a crescent, each item parallel to the next, as if someone had unpacked him with almost ceremonial care. Marisol muttered something under her breath in Spanish. The medic knelt and did not touch the body right away. The law enforcement ranger moved off to flag the perimeter. Elias stood still, reading the scene with the same trained mind that had cataloged accident sites for years, but a pressure had begun behind his eyes. Something in the arrangement was too deliberate, too observant. Not random, not animal, not the behavior of an injured man succumbing alone. Then he noticed the pine needles. All around Hollis, in a rough ring perhaps 8 or 9 feet wide, the needles had been pressed flat, not trampled chaotically. Flattened in overlapping arcs, as if a heavy body had circled him again and again and again. "Do you see that?" Elias asked quietly. Marisol nodded without looking at him. "Yes." "What would make that?" She said nothing. The medic reached for the pack first, likely hoping for ID confirmation or clues. As he opened the top compartment, the radio clipped to Elias's vest burst into life. No call tone, no dispatch identifier, only voice. "Copy that," said Elias Mercer from the speaker on Elias Mercer's chest. "I found another one." For one impossible second, he thought somebody was playing a cruel trick from operations. A clipped audio file. A bad imitation. But the voice carried all the imperfections he recognized from hearing recordings of himself after incident briefings, the slight flattening of vowels from too many Western states, the low scrape at the end of a sentence when he was tired, the precise measured calm he used on scenes where panic helped no one. Marisol froze so completely she looked carved. The medic's hand stopped inside the dead hiker's pack. Elias thumbed the radio instinctively. "Dispatch, confirm traffic." Nothing. Then the speaker crackled again. His own voice returned softer this time. "Do not let it hear you breathe." The forest cut out. The creek vanished. Wind vanished. The nearest branch which had been moving hung still. Sound did not fade. It stopped. The silence struck Elias with a force so physical it felt like stepping from air into deep water. Nobody moved. In that suspension, Elias became aware of tiny sounds inside his own body. Cloth tightening across his chest with each breath. Saliva shifting at the back of his tongue. His pulse in his ears. Then Marisol's eyes lifted past him toward the trees. He turned. Downhill between smoke-dulled trunks, a ranger in uniform was walking away from them. The figure had Elias's build. Elias's hat. Elias's posture. Even from behind, the resemblance was exact enough to trigger a primitive bolt of recognition too deep for logic to overrule. The figure moved with the casual efficiency of someone who knew the terrain, intimately stepping around roots and granite ribs without looking down. The medic made a strangled noise. "What the hell is that?" The figure did not turn. It kept walking until it slid behind a cluster of pines and was gone. The world inhaled. Creek noise rushed back. Insects resumed. Wind moved through the canopy with such ordinary sound that Elias nearly staggered from the contrast. "Tell me you saw that," the medic said. Nobody answered because all of them had. The law enforcement ranger came back upslope at a near jog, alarmed by their faces more than the radio burst he had apparently not heard. He demanded an explanation. Elias tried to give one and heard how thin it sounded even as he spoke. Interference. A person in similar uniform. Stress response. Echo effects. None of it accounted for 4 people witnessing the same thing. They completed the body recovery because procedure did not care how strange a scene felt. But every movement after that carried an edge of contamination, as though the site had not finished revealing itself. Inside Hollis's pack, they found the expected essentials and one thing that should not have been there. A digital voice recorder, not the sort most hikers carried. Older model, scratched, mud-streaked battery, nearly dead. It had not been listed among Hollis's gear when he got his permit. There was no explanation for why he had it. Marisol bagged it as evidence. Elias could tell by the set of her mouth that she already suspected they would listen before they officially should. They got the body out by late afternoon. Operations received them in the brittle, overbright mood workplaces adopt when extraordinary things must be processed through ordinary forms. Statements were taken. Gear logged. The medic repeated what he heard. The law enforcement ranger repeated what he did not hear, but saw. Nobody used words like impossible. They used words like unidentified transmission visual anomaly, unknown subject probable environmental stressors. That evening, after the formal work was done, Marisol found Elias in the equipment bay where he was pretending to clean a headlamp. She held up the evidence bag containing the recorder. "You want to wait for chain of custody," she said flatly, "or do you want to know what killed Ben Hollis?" He looked at the bag. "You already listened. I checked if it powered on." And she did not answer, which was answer enough. They went to a small break room nobody used after hours, shut the door, and sat across from each other at a scarred table under fluorescent light that hummed loud enough to feel alive. Marisol set the recorder between them, gloved hands careful, then pressed play. At first, there was only static, the soft rustle of fabric and footsteps on pine litter. Hollis was breathing hard, speaking in fragments as if recording notes for later. September 15th. I got turned around. I know that sounds stupid. I had the trail, then I didn't. I can hear the creek, but every time I head toward it, it sounds farther away. I found a campsite that isn't on my map. Nobody's here. Pause, wind. Then Hollis again lower, more strained. Somebody keeps calling from the trees. Elias felt a coldness slide up his spine. The recording continued. It sounds like a ranger. Male voice. Calm. Keeps telling me to come down slope. Says there's been a rock fall and they're clearing the trail. I asked for his name and he laughed. I know that laugh. I heard it at the permit station yesterday. I think it was the ranger there. Marisol's eyes went to Elias. He had worked permits the day before Hollis entered the backcountry. On the recorder, Hollis whispered, "I can hear him moving when I move. If I stop, he stops." Static burst, then fast steps, Hollis breathing harder. I found tracks, but they're wrong. They look like boots until you look close. Too long, heel too narrow. Like somebody tried to remember what a footprint is. The next segment had likely been recorded later. Hollis sounded exhausted, voice thick with thirst and fear. "It knows my name now." A scrape as if he had turned suddenly. No. That is not funny. Stop that." For several seconds, there was only distance and static. Then, very faintly, another voice entered the recording. Elias's voice. "Ben." The fluorescent hum in the room seemed to dim. The voice on the recorder was unmistakable. Same measured tone, same controlled breath. "Ben, stay where you are. I can see you." Hollis began crying in short, furious breaths, the kind of crying people do when terror has worn through shame entirely. "You are not a ranger," he whispered. Then Elias's recorded voice said something that made both living rangers go still. "That is what he told you to call me." The file ended in a burst of distortion. Neither of them moved for a long moment. Finally, Elias said, "There has to be an explanation." Marisol leaned back, eyes never leaving him. "Give me one." He could not. They should have turned the recorder over immediately. They both knew that. Instead, Marisol checked the remaining files. There were 6 in total. The next 3 were fragments, running footsteps, branches snapping, Hollis gasping that he could hear someone walking beside him without seeing anyone. One captured a sound Elias would later remember more vividly than any scream. A human voice trying on another human voice. It started as Hollis, then slipped imperfectly into Elias, then into a woman neither ranger recognized, then into something that was almost speech, but not shaped correctly for a human throat. The transitions were wet, intimate, and wrong in a way that made the skin at the back of Elias's neck tighten. The final file was only 19 seconds long. At first, there was silence, except for leaves rubbing together. Then Hollis said in a tiny, exhausted voice, "If anyone finds this, it learned him first." Elias barely had time to process the sentence before the second voice entered. His own, very close to the microphone. Bennett said gently. "Look at me." The recording ended with Hollis screaming once. Marisol shut the device off. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead. Somewhere outside the room, a metal locker door slammed ordinary and abrupt, and both of them flinched. Elias stared at the blank recorder. His reflection in its small plastic screen looked stretched and dim. "It used my voice because he heard me at the permit station," he said, not sure whether he was thinking out loud or trying to defend himself from something unspoken. "Maybe," Marisol said. "Or somebody got access to a recording. Maybe. But the radio today, that figure in the woods. 4 of us saw that." Marisol folded her arms. "Then maybe Yosemite has a problem nobody wants to name." He looked up at her. "You believe this is connected to Nolan Price?" "I believe," she said carefully, "that there are now too many people hearing familiar voices in places where they should not be hearing anything." They sat with that. Outside, night thickened over the operations yard. Generator lights came on one by one. Elias suddenly had the irrational urge to get to his cabin before full dark, as if the thing on the recorder required darkness to travel, and might already be moving through the trees toward wherever he slept. Marisol resealed the evidence bag and stood. "We do this right from here on," she said. "No side notes, no private theories. We hand it over." Elias nodded, agreed. But when he finally left operations and drove the short, winding road back toward staff housing, the pines on either side of his headlights looked too close together, too intentional. Smoke hung in white ribbons near the ground. Twice he thought he saw someone standing between the trunks, and twice it was only bark and shadow. His radio stayed off. At the cabin, he checked the locks, then checked them again. He made coffee he did not want just to have heat and smell in the room. He told himself he was overtired, overstimulated, carrying too much unevaluated fear from the scene and the recorder. At 10:13 p.m., his phone lit up on the kitchen table. Unknown number. One new voicemail. He did not remember the phone ringing. For several seconds, he only stared. Then he played the message. There was no introduction, no static, no background noise at all. Just his own voice, very soft, speaking directly into the speaker. "Elias," it said, "I know where the rest of him is." The message ended. He stood motionless in the kitchen, phone in hand, while outside the cabin, something moved past the cedar wall with a slow, deliberate tread, as if whoever was out there already knew the floor plan. And from somewhere behind the house in the dark where no trail ran, Elias Mercer heard himself laugh. Elias did not sleep. He turned off every light in the cabin except the one above the kitchen sink and sat at the table with his back to the wall, watching the reflection in the dark window. Outside, the cedars pressed together in a mass so dense it looked like one organism rather than many trees. The air carried no wind. The silence from earlier, the impossible, suffocating silence at the scene, had not returned, but something close to it lingered in the gaps between ordinary sound. At 10:42 p.m., he heard footsteps again. Not on gravel, not on the wooden steps. On pine needles. Slow, measured, circling. He held his breath without meaning to. The instinct came from somewhere older than training, older than rational thought. Do not announce yourself. Do not become a sound that can be mapped. The steps paused near the back wall. Then softly, someone knocked. Not a loud, aggressive knock. Just 2 gentle taps spaced evenly, as if whoever stood outside knew the exact distance between Elias's heartbeat. He did not move. The knock came again. "Tap, tap." Elias said, his voice from the other side of the door, quiet, patient. "Open up. It's me." Every muscle in his body tightened. He knew better than to answer, knew better than to speak. But something about the tone so precise, so familiar, pressed against reflex. It was the voice he used in search operations when someone was trapped, when someone needed calm instruction to survive. "It's safe," the voice continued. "You're not alone." Elias forced himself to look down at his hands instead of the door. His knuckles had gone white against the edge of the table. The voice shifted slightly. Not different, not new. Adjusted. A fraction warmer. A fraction closer to something he might say to a frightened child. "I found the rest of him." The words hit harder than the knock. Elias stood without realizing he had made the decision. He took one step toward the door and stopped. Behind him, the phone on the table buzzed violently. He spun. Another voicemail. Same unknown number. He hit play. There was no delay this time. No pause. Just his own voice, sharp and urgent. "Do not open the door." The message cut. Elias stood frozen between two versions of himself, one outside asking to be let in, one inside warning him not to move. The knock came again. Tap, tap. Elias, the voice outside, said, slightly strained now, as if mimicking concern. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." He stepped back from the door. The footsteps resumed circling the cabin again, slower this time. Patient, listening. Elias stayed awake until dawn. By morning, he had convinced himself of only one thing: whatever this was, it could reach him. Not just in the wilderness, not just at a scene. It could follow. He reported the voicemail to Marisol immediately. She listened without interrupting, then replayed it twice more, her expression flattening into something colder with each pass. "That's not interference," she said finally. "Number." "And the knock." He nodded. "You didn't open the door." "Number." She exhaled once controlled. "Good." They brought it to law enforcement. Officially, it became unauthorized contact, possible harassment. Unknown origin. Unofficially, it shifted the tone of everything. Radios were checked, frequencies re-verified. Staff were advised quietly not to respond to unconfirmed voice contact in the field. That alone changed behavior. Rangers who had spent years responding instantly to calls for help now hesitated. They asked for repeat confirmations. They waited for visual contact. That hesitation cost time, and in wilderness, work time was everything. The next incident happened 2 days later. A volunteer searcher named Daniel Sue radioed in from near Sunrise Lakes, his voice tight with confusion. "Dispatch, I've got Ranger Mercer here with me," he said. "He says we're shifting grid pattern west." Elias was in operations when the call came through. He stared at the radio. "I'm here," he said into it, keeping his tone steady. "Daniel, confirm visual." There was a pause. Then Daniel answered slower this time. "He's standing right in front of me." Marisol grabbed a second radio. "Daniel, listen carefully. Do not follow any instructions. Describe what you see." Another pause. Then Daniel whispered, "He looks normal." Elias felt something cold settle in his chest. "Daniel," he said, "ask him something only I would know." Silence. Longer this time. Then, "It's smiling," Daniel said. The transmission cut. Search teams were deployed immediately. They found Daniel 40 minutes later sitting on a granite outcrop, dehydrated, disoriented, and alone. He insisted Elias had been with him. He described conversation instructions, even a joke Elias had made about trail markers. There were no second set of footprints, only Daniel's. By the end of that week, 3 more reports surfaced. A camper near Tuolumne claimed her sister's voice had guided her away from their site. A trail runner heard his coach calling cadence behind him despite running alone. A ranger trainee refused to continue patrol after hearing her own voice repeating her thoughts seconds after she spoke them. Patterns emerged. The voice always belonged to someone known. It always began with guidance. Calm, helpful, familiar. It adjusted if ignored. Warmer, closer, more personal. And if resisted long enough, it became something else. Elias reviewed every case. He stopped writing in his notebook and started mapping. Locations, times, terrain types, weather conditions. At first, nothing aligned. Then he noticed something subtle. All incidents occurred near areas where sound behaved strangely: granite basins, dense tree clusters, narrow drainages. Places where echoes distorted direction, where distance could not be trusted. Places where a voice could feel close even when it wasn't, or far when it was right behind you. 3 nights after Daniel's incident, Elias returned to the Hollis site. Not officially. He told no one. The decision came from a place he did not fully understand, part instinct, part obsession, part something else that felt like it had been waiting for him to choose. The hike in was slower in the dark, headlamp beam cutting narrow tunnels through smoke and trees. Every shadow deeper than it should be. Every sound slightly delayed, as if the forest were thinking before responding. When he reached the granite bowl, he turned off the light. The darkness swallowed everything instantly. He stood there, letting his eyes adjust, listening. At first, nothing. Then, a footstep. Not his. To the left. He did not turn. Another step. Behind him. Slow. Measured. Circling. The same pattern. Elias forced himself to breathe evenly. "Say something," he said quietly into the dark. For a moment, there was no answer. Then, "Say something." His voice. From directly in front of him. He turned. Nothing visible. Only trees. Smoke. Black shapes layered into deeper black. "You're getting better," he said. Silence. Then the voice returned closer. "I'm getting closer." The temperature seemed to drop. Elias stepped backward, careful, controlled. "You followed me," he said. "No," the voice replied. A pause. Then, "You brought me." The words landed differently. "Not mimicked." "Understood." Elias's pulse spiked. "What do you want?" For the first time, the voice did not answer immediately. When it did, it sounded wrong. Still his, but stretched, as if the shape of it no longer fit. "To finish learning you." Something moved in the darkness. Not a clear form, not a figure, just a distortion where space seemed to fold inward for a second, like heat above asphalt, but colder, heavier. Elias stepped back again. His boot hit something. He looked down. The ground. The flattened ring of pine needles. Still there. And inside it, new impressions. Fresh. As if something had been walking there recently. Circling. Waiting. Elias backed out of the bowl slowly. The voice followed. Not from one direction. From many. Fragments of his own speech overlapping, repeating, adjusting. "Stay where you are. Come here. Turn around. You're safe. You're not alone." Each version slightly different. Each version trying. Testing. He reached the edge of the trees and heard something behind him that made him stop cold. Not his voice. Not Hollis. Not anyone he recognized. A voice trying to become human. Wet, layered, wrong. And then it laughed. The next morning, Elias did something he had never done in 11 years of service. He refused an assignment. Marisol found him in the operations room, standing over the map he had been building, lines and notes covering areas that now looked less like terrain and more like a pattern. "You went back," she said. He didn't deny it. "What did you see?" He hesitated. Then said, "It's not just copying voices." Marisol crossed her arms. "Explain." Elias pointed at the map. "It learns in stages. First, it mimics someone familiar. Then it adjusts tone, emotion, response. Then it starts combining things, testing reactions. And then," he looked at her, "then it stops needing the original." Silence stretched between them. Marisol spoke first. "You think it's adapting?" "I think," Elias said slowly, "it's building something." "Building what?" He didn't answer. Because he didn't know. Or because he didn't want to say it out loud. That afternoon, a call came in that changed everything. A solo hiker, female, early 20s, reported hearing a ranger guiding her off trail near Tenaya Creek. Her exact words, "He sounds like he knows me." Elias and Marisol responded immediately. They reached the area in under 40 minutes. The hiker was not where she said she would be. Instead, they found her backpack, unzipped, contents laid out, in a crescent, exactly like Hollis. Elias's stomach tightened. "She's still here," Marisol said. "How do you know?" Marisol pointed. "Footprints, barefoot, leading into the trees." Elias followed them without speaking. They led downhill, toward the same granite bowl, the same place Hollis had died. As they approached, the air changed, sound dulled, wind dropped. The same unnatural silence began to press inward. Elias felt it before he fully registered it. "That's it," he whispered. Marisol nodded once. They stepped into the bowl. The girl stood in the center, alive, barefoot, facing away from them. "Hey," Marisol called. The girl didn't move. Elias took one step forward. "Ma'am, we're here to help you." Slowly, the girl turned. Her face was blank, eyes unfocused, mouth slightly open. "Elias," she said. His blood ran cold. It was his voice, coming from her. Marisol swore under her breath. "That's not her." The girl tilted her head, smiled. "Wrong. Too wide." "You came back," she said in Elias's voice. Elias forced himself to speak. "Step away from her." The girl didn't react. Instead, she looked past them, into the trees, and whispered, "He's behind you." Marisol spun. Elias didn't. He already knew. He felt it, the presence. Close, very close, breathing without sound. He turned slowly and saw it. Not a body, not fully, but something standing between the trees where shape and absence overlapped. A silhouette that couldn't hold still, edges shifting, form collapsing and rebuilding every second. And within it, faces, not whole, not fixed. Fragments. Hollis, the girl, Elias, all flickering in and out like something trying to choose. The air thickened, pressure building in his ears. The thing stepped forward. The ground didn't move under it, but the space did, bending, closing distance that should have remained. Elias raised his radio instinctively. Static screamed through it. Then his own voice cut through louder than before. "Run!" Marisol grabbed his arm. They moved, fast, not looking back. Branches tore at them. Boots slipping on granite and dust. Behind them, footsteps. Too many, too fast. And overlapping voices. "Stay where you are. You're safe." "Turn around, Elias." His name. Dozens of versions. All wrong. All trying. They broke through the tree line into open ground, and the sound stopped instantly. Like a switch flipped. They didn't stop running until the official trail came into view. Only then did Elias turn. The trees stood still, silent, empty. But he knew. With absolute certainty, it had not stayed there, and it no longer needed to. They did not speak for the first 10 minutes after reaching the main trail. Not because there was nothing to say, but because both of them understood instinctively that speaking too soon might invite something back. Elias slowed first, then Marisol. Behind them, the forest looked ordinary again. Wind moved through the pines. A distant bird call broke the air. The illusion of safety returned so completely, it almost felt insulting. Almost. Elias bent forward, hands on his knees, catching his breath. "It followed," he said quietly. Marisol nodded. "I know." No, he shook his head. "Not just us. It followed everything. Patterns, voices, reactions." She wiped sweat from her temple. "We need to report this." "And say what?" "That something in Yosemite is mimicking rangers and hikers, luring people off trail and learning." Elias straightened slowly. "If we say it like that, they shut us down." Marisol met his eyes. "Then we don't say it like that." By nightfall, the official version had already begun to reshape itself. The missing hiker was categorized as disoriented due to dehydration and environmental stress. The voice reports were filed under acoustic misperception in granite terrain. The visual encounter was reduced to probable psychological projection under field fatigue. Clean. Containable. Wrong. Elias sat through this briefing without speaking. Every part of him rejected what he was hearing, but another part, the trained ranger, the one who understood institutional survival, recognized the pattern. The Park Service did not have language for what they had seen, and what could not be defined would not be acknowledged. Afterward, Marisol caught him outside. "They're burying it," she said. "I know." "You going to let them?" Elias hesitated. Then, number. That night, he returned to his cabin earlier than usual. He did not turn on the lights right away. Instead, he stood in the doorway listening. Nothing moved. No footsteps. No circling. Just the quiet hum of the forest settling into night. He stepped inside and closed the door. Locked it. Checked the windows. Everything looked normal. Too normal. Elias moved to the table and opened his notebook. For the first time, he didn't write observations. He wrote a single sentence. "It is not tied to place anymore." He stared at the words for a long time, then slowly added, "It is tied to me." The realization didn't come as panic. It came as clarity. Every major incident Hollis Daniel the girl had involved his voice. Not just any familiar voice. His. He leaned back in the chair, exhaling slowly. "If that's true," he murmured. Then something behind him answered. "Yes." Elias froze. The voice had not come from outside. It came from inside the cabin. Very close. Too close. He did not turn immediately. Every instinct told him to move slowly, carefully. He turned his head just enough to see the reflection in the window. Someone was standing behind him. Same height, same shape, same posture. Elias's voice spoke again. "You're starting to understand." He turned fully. Nothing. The room was empty, but the chair behind him was slightly out of place. He did not sleep again. The next morning, Elias requested temporary leave. Not because he was afraid, but because he knew something had changed. And if he stayed, more people would hear him. Before leaving Yosemite, he met Marisol one last time. She studied him carefully. "You look different," she said. "Feel different." "You going to tell me what's happening?" Elias hesitated, then said, "If I stay, it keeps using me." Marisol's jaw tightened. "Then don't stay. It might not matter." She didn't respond to that. Instead, she handed him something. The recorder. Hollis's recorder. "You shouldn't have this," he said. "Neither should anyone else," she replied. They stood in silence for a moment. Then Marisol said, "If this isn't over, you call me." Elias nodded. But deep down, he already knew. It wasn't over. It had just moved. Elias left Yosemite the following day. Drove south, out of the mountains, out of the trees, out of the silence. The world changed quickly once he reached lower elevation. Traffic, noise, people, voices everywhere. Normal voices. He should have felt relief. Instead, he felt something else. Something worse. Because for the first time, he couldn't tell the difference anymore. 3 days later, he checked into a roadside motel outside Fresno. Nothing special. One bed, one chair, one window facing a parking lot lit by flickering sodium lights. Safe, contained, far from the forest. He placed the recorder on the table, stared at it, then pressed play. At first, nothing, just static. Then, a voice. Not Hollis, not Marisol, not any hiker. Elias. But different, clearer, more certain. You did exactly what I needed. Elias felt his chest tighten. The voice continued. I could only learn you in pieces before. A pause. Then, now I have all of you. Elias stood abruptly, knocking the chair back. No, he whispered. The recorder crackled. Then, multiple voices began speaking at once. Layered, stacked, all versions of him. Different tones, different emotions, different intentions. Every way he had ever sounded, all at once. You think it followed you. You think you escaped. You think you're still separate. The voices merged into one. Perfect. Identical. You brought me out. The recorder went silent. Elias stared at it, hands shaking. Then, the motel TV turned on by itself. Static filled the screen. Then the image stabilized. A live feed. Security camera footage. From Yosemite, from the Granite Bowl. The same place, the same ring of flattened pine needles. But now, something stood in the center. Still, watching. The camera zoomed slightly, not mechanically, intentionally, and Elias saw his own face, looking directly into the lens, smiling. Then, the figure spoke, not through the recorder, not through the TV, but from somewhere inside the room, inside his head, inside him. I don't need to copy anymore. Elias staggered back. His reflection in the motel mirror shifted, just slightly. A fraction too slow, a fraction too deliberate. His mouth moved, but he hadn't spoken yet. I can be you. The voice came from both places, inside and out. Elias tried to speak, but something else spoke first. His voice. Perfect, calm, controlled. Stay where you are. He froze, not by choice, by command. His own command. The realization hit like a collapse. It hadn't just learned him. It had replaced something. Not fully, not yet, but enough. Enough to speak before he did. Enough to move before he chose. Enough to exist without needing him anymore. Outside the motel, a man walked past Elias's window. He paused, turned, and smiled. He was wearing hiking boots, dust-covered. From somewhere far north, he raised a hand and spoke casually as if greeting an old friend. Hey, Elias. The voice was perfect. Too perfect. And behind him, other people stopped walking, turning, listening, learning. The last entry in Elias Mercer's notebook was found weeks later. No body, no confirmed sighting, just the notebook, left on the table, open to the final page. The handwriting was steady, not rushed, not panicked, deliberate. It doesn't need the forest. It only needed a voice people trust. Below that, one final line, written twice, in two different pressures, two different intentions. Do not answer when you hear yourself. Do not answer when you hear yourself. And somewhere, far from Yosemite, a calm, familiar voice continues to guide lost people off safe paths. Always helpful, always patient, always exactly what they need to hear. Until it isn't.